Hello, everybody. It looks like we're live. We are just going to wait until we have a few more attendees for the webinar. So let's just give it just one more minute. Thank you to everyone who is joining us today. This is going to be a really, really great webinar about what we are all experiencing right now with the impact of the coronavirus. So we'll just give it one more minute before we get started. All right, so it looks like we are ready to go. So welcome everyone to our very popular webinar about the impacts of the coronavirus. Things are changing by the hour, and the only way for us to get through this is together. So today, with the help of industry leaders, we will discuss the impacts, challenges, and perspectives that we can all take with us as we try and navigate this ever-evolving situation. So let's get right to it. I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. Randy Miller, she is VP of Strategic Sourcing and Procurement at Zendesk. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we also have Greg Tennyson. He is the head of Global Corporate Services for VSP Global.
Thank you, Sarah. Look forward to the conversation.
And last but not least, Sopan Shah, Chief Procurement Officer at Intercontinental Hotels Group.
Hi, everybody. Great to join.
Awesome. Well, we're going to run through some questions that we already have prepared for the conversation today, and then we will look at addressing some of the audience questions at the end. So if you have any questions, make sure to put that into the Q&A, and we will definitely try to get through to those. So let's get started. Sopan and Randy, I want to ask you the first question. The outbreak of the coronavirus is a rapidly changing situation, like I mentioned in the intro of this webinar. What is the view from the CPO level? What are you guys seeing?
Randy, ladies first. You want to start off?
Sure. Thanks so much, Sarah, again, for having us. So as you mentioned, things are changing so rapidly. And I think what I keep telling my team and what I'm doing is continually trying to look around the corner and trying to be proactive rather than reactive. It's challenging in this environment to not be reacting every day. But really looking ahead to say, we started this, we were probably about a week ahead of the mandatory work from homes and things like that, starting to cancel events. But then really looking ahead to the first thing we did was actually call our partners like Zoom and Slack and say, we're going to be really, really heavily dependent on you, as is many other companies. So what's your continuity plan, and what's your, what are you guys doing to make sure that you're able to support the business in this new way that we're working? So those were some of the major things that we were doing, in addition to trying to, I hate to use the word stockpiling, but getting as many laptops and peripherals and things like that we could, just in anticipation of what was to come. So, but again, things are still changing, and it's almost like as much as you try to prepare and try to look around the corner and be proactive as opposed to reactive, it's just, it's so volatile that it's hard to prepare for every single situation and scenario that's coming up.
Absolutely. And Sopan?
Yeah, so from our side, as you guys can imagine, the travel, tourism, and hospitality industries have been severely impacted by truly what I would call as an exceptional historic event for humanity. And as we started to think about what do we need to do, we started seeing the first kind of impact of this in China. We have, almost 400 hotels in China, and including 4 at the center of Wuhan. So being able to ensure that we can provide supplies, the required goods and services for our hotels, starting in China, which for us started almost, 6 to 8 weeks ago, this crisis, and then being able to, unfortunately, see it spread around the world has been exceptional. But we really focused in on, first and foremost, providing our colleagues in the hotels the equipment, the services they need to support the guests. And in some cases, our guests, for example, in Wuhan, have been the WHO, the medical staff, who had come into the city to support that crisis. And then secondarily, making sure that we are preparing whatever we can from a business continuity perspective, both our indirect and direct suppliers for goods and services, much like Randy said, to prepare this kind of the workforce around the world operating in a remote way, but also providing the support that everybody requires. And for us, the biggest thing I would say is, the industry we're in, at the end of the day, when hotels are closed and planes are on the ground and people are not traveling for the right reasons, has an exceptional impact to us from a capital perspective and business performance perspective. So being able to make quick decisions to help the business kind of weather the storm, which is quite severe, is the biggest thing that we're focused on today.
Absolutely. So some of the, same challenges, but also different challenges as well. Impacts are varying based on your different businesses. And so it's really great to hear from both of you of how it's impacting you differently, but also the same. So my next question is going to go to Greg, actually. What are you hearing from the marketplace? We've just heard from Randy and Sopan, from the CPO standpoint, but what are we hearing from the marketplace itself?
Thanks, Sarah. Our focus at VSB Global has been on the health and safety of our employees, as well as our members, the VSB network doctors that we service, and the community in which we operate. We are taking the necessary precautions to ensure we prioritize their needs first and foremost. We are partnering with our supply chain operations team to address any supply chain needs that they have. Fortunately, we're in a good position. We do have some shortages that we're managing, similar to what Randy had shared. On the IT side, we stopped refreshing technology within the organization and instead building up a surplus. And I use the word carefully as well, Randy, because I don't want to be accused of being a hoarder, but we are building up surplus. And then as we identified needs, as individuals work from home and they have a desktop as opposed to a laptop, we're redeploying the laptop so they have a device to work from home. It's interesting what's happening, in my opinion, what's happening within the supply chain space. There's some interesting behaviors. I've actually taken to social media, leveraging my LinkedIn account to identify a shortage with masks. We're trying to find 3M N95 8210 masks for our doctors. Again, we service doctors. We have doctors. It's part of VSB Ventures, our own practices that we need to service their needs, as well as the retail outlets. We're trying to make sure, again, that we're protecting our employees with necessary equipment. But interesting, so I am getting a lot of, let's say, opportunity through the LinkedIn when sourcing. Some of it spam, some of it legitimate. But if anyone out there has N95 masks, please reach out. I'd love to buy them.
Well, and it's an interesting, concept that we're turning to social media for different aspects of our business as well, that we never really thought about utilizing it before. Some people are taking it as an opportunity to network and use from a sales standpoint. Some people like yourselves are using it to actually source the product that you're needing in this time, because, it connects us globally. And that's what we need right now, is for everybody to come together and, help each other out where the gaps are. So that's a really great segue into my next question. What are you seeing in your respective industries associated to supply chain? So the goods and the services that are coming your way. And maybe I'll start with Greg on this one, just because you sort of started the conversation by saying that you're using LinkedIn to source some of your products. So can you maybe elaborate on that? And then we'll go to Randy and then Sopan.
Yeah, we've really opened up kind of the opportunities, not only social media, but to use technologies that we haven't used in the past. Just this morning, I won't mention the company name, We didn't have a pre-existing relationship. So in parallel with trying to negotiate a license arrangement with the technology, I'm using their sourcing capability to prove out the opportunity. So I really tasked the team to get creative. We are gamifying it. I have executives throwing their own personal money into a kind of a coffer, company coffer, just to incentivize the team to get shortages resolved. So we are trying to get as creative as possible. Again, focusing on our priorities being the employee, the doctor network, VSP Ventures. We just acquired VisionWorks. So we have taken an inside view of what our needs are, making sure that we're servicing them first and foremost.
Awesome. Randy?
Sure. Being a software company, we don't have a huge goods type of supply chain that we're relying.
Sopan, I think we'll go to you. We've kind of lost Randy for a second.
Yeah, I think, for us, we've had an incredible amount of things that we've needed to source, again, all around the world. It's interesting going back to, the impact of this virus starting in China. Within the first 15 minutes of President Xi making the initial announcements back in January, 50 million masks were ordered in 15 minutes.
Wow.
So you can imagine the impact to industries around the world of pivoting extremely quickly to support people. And at that time, this was still very new. We didn't know many things about this virus.
Right.
So since then, obviously, we've worked very closely of taking guidance from the WHO and the CDC of ensuring that we get the right goods and services. But we also have a level of complexity that we manage being in the hospitality space. We have around, 54,000 direct suppliers globally and about 7,000 indirect suppliers. So as you can think about the complexity of managing that, one of the biggest things has been trying to get good master data for us to be able to act. And I think one of the things that'll come out of this crisis is that procurement as a profession and supply chain will become much better at harnessing, what I call master data and intelligence to be prepared, God forbid, for something like this to happen again.
Yeah, and also a better understanding, I think, from a global standpoint as to what supply chain really is, how important those roles are, from every single parts of the supply chain, including procurement. So, I think there's a lot that we're going to see and changes that are going to be made just coming from this. Sorry, Randy, did you want to just finish what you were going to say about the goods and services side? I don't know. Can you hear me, Randy? Oh, there you go. You're off mute. Did you want to contribute to that?
Sorry. Yeah, I can. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'll just follow up a little bit there. As a software company, we're not heavily reliant on a strong supply chain to deliver our products and our services. However, where we're feeling the hit, as I mentioned, was on the IT and just being able to service our employees and make sure that they've got the resources that they need. So as everybody else is scrambling and trying to get laptops and IT equipment, we've also extended to our employees the ability to go out and source on their own if they need monitors or peripherals or things like that for their home office. Certainly, laptops are a little bit different story because of the encryption and standardizing them for our work environment. But we've also felt the pain of all of this in our contingent workforce too. So, typically we don't allow contractors to take their laptops, in and out of the
Right.
office, depending on what type of contract work they're doing for us. So we've been having to, get creative with that. I know some new hires and even some contractors have received a laptop that's got stickers on it from employees that, have left the company. So we're definitely getting creative in that area.
And I think you bring up a good point. Like, that's really what we've got to do, is think outside of the box, get creative, and use what we have as we have it right now. So you brought up a really good point about everyone really starting to work remotely. We're going to get to a really big question about that later on in the conversation. But I'm sure that it's really impacting your businesses globally. That's got to be at least one of the impacts. But I want to get to the top 3 impacts that each one of you are seeing in your respective businesses. What are those top 3 impacts? Sopan, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I would say probably one, cash is king for many industries right now. Liquidity is probably one of the biggest impacts that many companies are facing, not only because if you think about it, business has been operating at 60 miles an hour, 100 kilometers an hour, and it's gone to 5 around the world across many industries. So I would say first is cash liquidity is very important. 2, the health and safety and well-being. And that's not only the physical well-being, but the mental well-being of our colleagues and employees during this crisis is probably a huge impact. And 3rd is just communications. Communicate, engage with the teams, reach out to people. We're encouraging people to really reach out to people they don't work with on a day-to-day basis, just so they have someone to talk to. We're doing things like virtual lunches. So people sit on a video conference and eat lunch together from their homes. We're having people go tour virtual museums online together as a team building exercise. So there's a lot of interesting things we're able to do. And we're fortunate also in that front. The company has actually launched a virtual working summit, which is kind of pre-recorded with experts, different tips for ergonomics to how to work in a remote way, that's been deployed to tens of thousands of employees worldwide for us. And that's been also a huge help because like many of us, we went from being a normal business and especially in our business where we work with people at the heart of our business, face to face, and give people a place to sleep, going to a virtual environment has been a rapid shift. But I think we'll learn a lot from this as we move forward.
Yeah, and it's a great point about the well-being as well, because I think each one of us as individuals, not just, business professionals, but even just personally, there's a lot of different things sort of coming at each one of us right now. There's the stress of having to deal with it from a business standpoint. There's the financial, there's the repercussions later. And so you make a really good point that we just need to sort of check up on each other, do a wellness check, make sure we're all kind of isolated too, right? Like we can talk to each other on video, but we're also self-quarantining. We're not getting out. We're not seeing people as much. And so even those that are living on their own, or, just to reach out and do that check. That's a great point. And thank you so much for bringing that up. Greg, I'm going to send this one over to you. What are the top 3 impacts that you're seeing?
It's interesting. Sopan made some great points. Just to extend a couple of his thoughts, we're really focused on, with individuals working from home, phishing, cybersecurity attacks, because with the distributed workforce, I think we're more suspect. So I would caution listeners really to partner with their information security, their CISO, to make sure that that's top of mind for the organization. It has required individuals, certainly the procurement team here, to be very agile, flexible in how we work. So we're looking at, beyond just the tools that we use today, to give Microsoft Teams a plug, we're using Microsoft Teams to stay in contact, to stay engaged with the team. I got to compliment our leadership team. I mean, the message coming from our leadership team is to remain calm, confident, and engaged with the team, constantly checking in. making sure that they appreciate, that they know that you care, show that empathy to the organization. So the message from the top has been great. Our focus on employees, members, doctors, communities, and how we are aligning our priorities is reassuring as well, because people have clarity on what our purpose is. So I can't compliment enough our leadership and how they're handling the situation and trying to keep everyone calm and focused on our key deliverables. So it's been very refreshing.
What about with suppliers? Like we're talking a lot about employees and different things like that. Has there been a shift in, the way you're communicating, how you're communicating, what you're communicating with your suppliers, your vendors?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked about kind of the social norms, behaviors that are happening. We're getting a lot of communication coming in from the suppliers around the coronavirus, COVID-19, reassuring us that they've taken the necessary precautions, that they have focused on the right priorities, continuity of supply, et cetera. We've also done a lot of outreach. We're using a solution to survey our suppliers to make sure that they're up and running, if they're considering moving manufacturing operations, a different substituted product, et cetera. So we've undertaken a lot of outreach as well to the suppliers to reaffirm that we still have a need. What is their manufacturing plan looks like? Are they invoking their business continuity plan? So a lot of collaboration, communication happening, and it's orchestrated well. But as you can imagine, during this let's say state of craziness, chaos, it's nice to know that everyone's level-headed and focused on the right things. So again, just to Sopan's point, a lot of collaboration coordinated in a manageable way to check our supply base. We are finding some shortages, some challenges. We are getting creative, as I mentioned earlier, the LinkedIn post. But I think it requires that we decouple ourselves from this compliance focus that most procurement organizations have and get creative and make sure that we're meeting the needs of the company.
And just on that note, somebody from the audience said that 3M has ramped up N95 production, and that was according to a press conference, I think, this morning. So
if they have a lead there, pass it along.
All right, there you go. You heard it here. Get in touch with Greg after this webinar. Randy, I'm going to send it over to you. I know that we've spoken a lot about the wellness and of our employees and working remotely. What are some of the other top impacts that you guys are seeing over at Zendesk?
Sure, I agree that our employee focus has been very, very top of mind. But one of the other things, and I think we probably are all in this situation, and many of those on the call too, but it's not just how are we maintaining those relationships with our customer or with our employees, but also our customers. And that, takes on a whole new realm when everything is virtual, when you are trying to either sell or, just maintain those relationships and ensure that, things are going well with your customers. One of Zendesk's core values is focus on our customers and build relationships. So this whole, our values are really being tested in this new virtual environment. And it has been so encouraging to see how flexible our workforce, our sales force has been in terms of how they're reaching out, how they're showing up in front of their customers. And so that's been a really big thing. Also, even we are in the customer support software business. And so, we are extending opportunities for additional chat features and things like that, and video chats, and so that there is more of an engagement for our customers to engage with their customers in this virtual environment that we're in now. I also want to say our events team has been absolutely stellar in how they have responded to this situation. We canceled our biggest event of the year just days prior to it starting. And this was kind of just a week ahead of the mass, shutdowns of everything. And at the time that we made the decision to cancel. Our event was being held in Miami Beach. There was not any cases in Florida at the time, and it was very tenuous as to whether we should cancel or move forward. And sure enough, the week that we were scheduled to have it was when Florida announced their first case of COVID-19. So as you can imagine, it was a huge hit financially, and just the disappointment of, all of these customers and sponsors that were going to be attending this event. The events team and, in partnering with our branding team and our marketing team, really, really came together, and they are putting on multiple virtual events now that are actually going to end up reaching a far greater audience than we had, that were, the 2,500 or so that were scheduled to attend our user conference. So we're kind of taking what was just a very, very hard, difficult, and disappointing decision, and turning it into something that is really, really fantastic. The last thing that I will say, one of the impacts that we've had on the business. Greg, you mentioned how impressed you've been with your leadership. I think we as a company have more visibility to our leadership now than ever before. Our C staff is putting out they're putting out a daily video. Our CFO spoke the other day. Our CEO has done a couple of them. Our products team, our head of products is coming online, and our COO has done a few too. So just that exposure and having them come into your living room or your home office, and having that visibility to them, and them stepping up and saying, here's what's going on, here's what it's like working at my house today with my dog and my kid, and things like that. And here's the state of the business. I think it's brought a calming effect to all of the employees, and it's just given us greater visibility to our C staff, which I think has been really, really great.
Yeah. So some of the key points from what you just said was, being agile and being able to pivot. I think we're really seeing that from a lot of organizations right now. And to Greg and Sopan's point, the collaboration that we're seeing. I mean, I always say collaboration is the future of business. I think we're seeing it more now than ever. And then the visibility, right? I think we're getting more visibility into our leadership teams. Like you said, people are being more authentic with what's going on and more personable. Right? This is, I have a dog, I have kids, I have to deal with them. I'm also doing video calls, and we're doing conference calls, and we're doing everything that we can to put that forth. So we talked about shortages. I know Greg talked about it. Sopan, you talked about it as well. We also talked about that on our prep call for this about a week ago. And so I'm going to turn this over to Sopan. How are you planning for the supply shock post Chinese New Year? And I think when I say this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, what we're seeing now may or may not get worse. I know that China is, pretty much back online. They are producing. I heard from somebody, I think it was today, that Adidas, their lines are fully up and running, and they're, producing product. We're going to miss some of the key, I guess, the key Mother's Days and different things like that this spring. But I think people are looking forward to the fall as well. Can you touch on that? I know that's a big ask. I just threw a bunch of stuff at you, but.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to the timeline on what's happened since January of 2020, essentially we saw, a natural inventory buildup across various goods and services in Asia, and specifically China, where a lot of things are being produced, across industries. So there was a normal buildup to inventory like there is every year before Chinese New Year shutdown. And then as Chinese New Year ended is when, China went into a lockdown state for quite a few weeks. So some industries obviously had anywhere from a 3 to 6 week delay in getting production back to normal capacity. But you're absolutely right, Sarah, that most of China and manufacturing in China is back to anywhere from 75 to probably 95, 100% in normalcy. The impact, though, when you think about products and goods, is that they're now facing an export challenge because the demand coming into markets such as ours in the US or the UK, continental Europe, so on and so forth, has all of a sudden fallen off a cliff because people are either staying at home, people are concerned about their investments, their jobs, their income. So that discretionary spending has been pulled back fairly dramatically around the world and outside of China. So you almost have this, very interesting, I like to call it the sine wave of impact to demand that's spreading out around the world, that started in China, which was a supply issue, but now it's a demand issue for the exporters coming out of Asia and China specifically. So, it's if I knew what the answer was going to be or when this would be over, I think I'd be a millionaire. But it's going to be a tough 3 to 6 months around the Western and Northern hemispheres in terms of just demand being very, very anemic. And if anything, when there is a recovery, the question is it a sharp V or if it is a prolonged U in terms of a recovery? Again, different industries with different levels of impact. But when it is available, things will get back to normal and should get back to normal quite quickly. But I think the biggest challenge from a supply chain and goods moving around the world is this kind of delayed impact in other markets for what first started in the impact in China.
Well, and I think the unknown too, right? I mean, how do you do your planning at this point? Well, I guess is my question to you, right? How do you plan right now?
Honestly, I had my leadership team meeting earlier today, and we were, like many companies, planning on putting in and locking in everybody's goals and metrics and objectives for the year. And honestly, there is no point. In fact, no one really knows, all the way up to the highest levels of our company. No one knows how long this is going to be, how fast the recovery is going to be, and what the real impact is going to be. So I think what you do is you instead say to people, focus on doing the right thing, right? Focus on the right thing and the purpose of the business that we all operate in. And if you focus what you're trying to do around that, when the recovery does come, we'll be focused to, move quickly. And I think that's the key message that people are going to really learn out of this experience is this resiliency to ambiguity. We all have to embrace ambiguity for 2020 because none of us are going to have the answer. Even senior leaders and chief executives don't have the answer. So it's about how resilient we are in just dealing with that and focusing on where we can add value, what the current problem is, and still making sure that we don't take our eye off of all those control elements that we still need to, adhere to. This is also not an excuse to break rules and do things incorrectly. In fact, this is the time to probably do things properly because of the heightened risks, such as Greg mentioned earlier, such as cybersecurity. So those are all the challenges together, but it's living in a world of ambiguity, I think, will be the biggest test for everyone this year.
Well, thank you, Sopan. Greg, did you want to jump in here? I know you were talking about shortages earlier. How are you planning for that supply shock?
It's interesting. I did want to add to Sopan's commentary. What we're seeing is a lot of companies have been restricted to export by their government. So I'm searching for N95 masks, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this list of countries who are producing N95 masks who've been told by their government to divert the inventory, the supply to their local economy, and they're not exporting, which is further complicating, supply chain issues. So then you add the tariff issue on top of it. How are tariffs going to be managed during this period of crisis as well? So there is a lot of complexity. And, earlier there was a comment made regarding liquidity. Being in a cash position certainly drives a lot of these decisions, but I'm finding, suppliers are demanding payment in full upfront prior to receipt of goods. So there's the assumption of risk there that's transferred now to the buyer because you're buying product that you haven't inspected, you haven't accepted, and you're paying in full. So there's that assumption of risk. So the dynamics have certainly changed in that supply chain equation in favor of the seller. And it's going to be interesting, to Sopan's point, when that shift balances or equalizes. But right now, clearly the supplier who has inventory is in a position of strength, and you really have no leverage. And I wish Mark Raffin was on the call, negotiations ninja, but you really have no leverage in your conversations with the supplier. It's basically them dictating terms. So it's not a very good position to be in as a buyer right now.
Interesting. Well, and then you've totally done the segue for me into my next question, because the next question is about mitigating risks. And you were talking about the risks that are involved in some of those discussions. And even if they do have inventory, if the government is halting some of that inventory and redirecting it somewhere else, what does that mean for you as, the buyer? Right. So then my question to all of you is, what are the top 3 things you are doing to mitigate risks during the outbreak? And Randy, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Well, I keep going back to, we don't have a strong supply chain and a need for tangible goods so much other than IT products. So I'm not going to harp on that. But I will talk a little bit about what we're doing in terms of, as we are looking at new buys or new purchases that are coming in, we're really looking at things with a lens of what is business critical right now. So Ben, I think you talked about, cash is king right now, and that liquidity is so important, and we need to be focused on that. So we're really kind of, applying a much heavier lens as we look at the criticality of new things coming in. We're also really looking at, as we are renewing contracts and, saying, what do we really need? Is there anything that we can do without? Are we right sized? So even though we've done that over the past, I think we're getting a lot more stringent in how we are looking at things and really making sure that where we're spending our money. Greg, you mentioned, the upfront payments. There's still a lot of that that's happening in the software space as well. So those are some of the things. Our events, we expect that we're going to come out of this, and event planning, takes many months, and you're planning way ahead, for those. So we're starting to engage and look at upcoming events, in the fall, but we're also much more stringent and strict on those cancellation terms and what those look like, and how we might be able to best mitigate risk, and all the things that we as sourcing professionals and procurement professionals tell our business partners, are so important. I think they're starting to realize, like, oh, I think they knew what they were talking about when, cancellation for convenience, and, making sure that we're very clear in our contract terms, for some of these things. I think they're starting to understand why those things are so important, and why we plan and negotiate for worst case scenarios, not your everyday, work environment, because we're certainly not in those situations anymore.
Absolutely. Totally agreed with you on that. So I'm going to pass this over to Greg to talk about how you're mitigating risks. I do have a question from the audience from Anna McGovern. She says, are they changing terms in the middle of the game? So I thought maybe you could answer that, as well as talking about, mitigating risks on your side as well.
Yeah, interesting question. Just yesterday, I thought I had landed a supply source for the mask. And at the 11th hour, they came back with a price increase and changed payment terms, because again, they know they're in a position of leverage. So I thought I had negotiated a good price point, albeit a premium given the shortage. But they came back with, it was a more than 50% increase in the price, because they appreciate I was ready to commit. So there's a lot of games being played. And I just would caution people, when looking at new supply chains, new sources of supply, really make sure that they're vetting that supplier. before committing. We've been very cautious about paying up front. To Rindy's point, it is interesting during this state of, call it chaos, the business is now coming to us to ask for assistance. So they're coming at us for meetings and events, trying to get out of the cancellation fees when we never saw the contract to begin with, but they're looking for our assistance. On a personal level, we've adopted all of the COVID guidelines, social distancing, making sure that, it's only business essential travel. The campus is primarily working from home. So we've invoked that across the, if you will, non-business essential functions. We are providing, our facility teams or janitorial teams with the necessary assets that they need in order to sanitize the facility, clean the facility, keep it clean. Work from home has presented unique challenges in and of itself that we're working through. We have a strong business continuity plan process at BSP Global, but I think it's drove home the point that we need to take it serious in the future. I think Sopan and Rindy have made some great comments. This will be probably the best post-mortem learning opportunity I've seen in my career. And I've experienced a lot, believe me. But having to really implement a BCP and execute, doing the post-mortem on what we can do better next, I think is going to be very insightful. And I would submit that this won't be the first time that we have to invoke a BCP, unfortunately. I think this is going to become a reoccurring theme, maybe not next year, but certainly within a 5-year period, we're going to have another pandemic that we have to work through. So I would caution everyone to take good notes and make sure that they're actioning, learning from their experience and developing a plan to allow them to execute better next time.
Absolutely. And I've heard from a couple of people that with everybody going remote, they might not actually go back to in office, which I don't know is relevant to everybody, but definitely something I think companies are thinking about moving forward after this crisis. And then also, you talk about the costs going up. I think we're seeing that a lot in trucking and on the logistics side and things like that. And it's just a matter of thinking about not just in this situation, but further along down the line and in the future and how we want to work with our customers and our vendors. It's one thing to show it now and to work that way in this moment. But what does that mean for your future relationships as well? Just something to think about. So Pan, we didn't get to you on that question. We've got a few that we need to get through. We've got about 15 minutes left trying to get to some audience questions as well. So I'm going to go to the next one if you don't mind. What leadership decisions were accelerated or put on hold because of the outbreak? I know that I was going to put that out to Rendy and Greg. So Pan, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that one as well, but You're more than welcome to.
I can do a quick one. I would say, being an agile decision maker is a crash course for everybody in a situation like this. There were decisions that I had to make as a leader very, very quickly before even, going to anybody for approval. We had an opportunity, for example, weeks ago to move on a 40-foot container of masks. N95s that were FOB a port in Shenzhen, and then I needed to send it to 10 countries, air freighted immediately. So those were the types of decisions you have to make on the fly from a leadership perspective. And the good news is when you have a crisis like this, your executive team, your board appreciates that quick decision making, because the feedback to me was that was the right call.
Rendy, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. And I'll just, weigh in quickly. Our leadership team, came into 2020 with a really strong 3-year long range plan. And, it's 2020 for sure is out the window, and they are behind closed doors and revamping and relooking at, you know, how are we changing things, and I think more will come out of that. I think one of the biggest impacts for us is going to be what is our location strategy, and you know, as we've talked about, you know, this new work from home environment, I think that is going to be a large part of how we continue to work going forward. And, you know, everybody's looking at how do we mitigate costs. Certainly this is a way. We are a Bay Area based company, and you know, we're in some of the, you know, highest priced real estate locations around the world. And so, you know, as we can mitigate that and lower those costs, we're certainly looking at those things. But and I mentioned the decision to, you know, cancel our biggest event of the entire year. That was a huge one. So I think there's more to come. We have not seen all of the decisions and the changes to our 2020 planning.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for sharing those. And Greg, did you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I've shared previous, but a couple times the virtual, you know, I'll give a plug to Procurement Foundry, the virtual event coming up, but it's going to be interesting to see how our space changes as a result of the chaos, the crisis.
Yeah,
I do see a lot more virtual events. I do see a lot more, if you will, thoughtful execution around expenses. You know, again, I couldn't be prouder of the VSB Global leadership, the focus and the prioritization of the employee health and welfare. You know, the focus on our members, our doctor network, our community has been refreshing. It's never been an issue. It's now, not only is it top of mind, it's clearly captured in how they're communicating and collaborating with the team. And the collaboration, I think, and the access to leadership as a result of the chaos, I think is important. So Pam made the comment around decision-making, being agile, flexible, and honestly taking risk because it's the right thing for the business, and being freed up, empowered to do that, I think is refreshing. Procurement, I believe personally, and it's been said by Rindy and Sopan, procurement will further elevate their role as a result of this because of the importance placed on, you know, securing supplies, mitigating risk, you know, helping, you know, employee welfare and the safety of the employees, et cetera. So procurement is going to come out of this in a stronger position. I would challenge those in the procurement space to be equipped to service that need and service it quickly.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, because Greg brought up the virtual conference Forge that Procurement Foundry is putting on April 28th. We are actually going to do, we're going to bring back this panel during that virtual conference to do like a 30-day, you know, follow up to this conversation. You know, we're talking about where we are now today. In 30 days, we're going to be able to take this conversation, I think, to a whole nother level and really be talking about what we've learned and some more tactics and things that we've been able to put in place to move things forward, just to let everybody know on that one. So my question, since everybody's gone remote, we've talked about, you know, well-being of our employees and our team members. We've talked about virtual team meetings, I guess. Sopan, you were talking about, what is one piece of advice that you could give to the audience and the listeners on how to effectively lead your teams remotely and keep them motivated? Sopan, I'll send that over to you.
I think it starts with we're all people. We're all people. You know, no matter what level you are, what role you have, but everybody has lives. Everybody has loved ones that they may be taking care of. They may have family, they may have children, they may have pets. And everybody has a complexity in their life that is now on show, right? Because they're dealing with taking care of children. They're dealing with trying to be teachers, mediocre teachers maybe as parents, and appreciating what teachers do provide. And I think the biggest thing I can say is having an appreciation for everybody's life is complex. Everybody's life has challenges. And just understanding and appreciating that through small little gestures, maybe checking in with someone, or letting someone know that it's okay. Earlier this week, I was in a conference call with someone whose 2.5-year-old toddler came running up and just melted down while she was on the conference call. And it was important to say to that lady, it's okay. And this is just the circumstance we're all in. And I think by making people appreciate that, it goes a long way in giving, for them to give their full engagement in a moment like this. And that's something that they will cherish and carry on for years to come.
Being more empathetic. And I think we're going to see, more of that, hopefully, during these times. Randy, one thought on how everybody can keep everybody motivated remotely.
Yeah, I think allowing them to be human and to, say this is hard and, be empathetic with that. That again, I'll go back to one of Zendesk's core values is practice empathy. And so we are really, really getting to, put our words and our values into action with this. The other thing that I think is really important is the mental health of our employees right now. And it can be, we can spend all day sitting at our kitchen table. Many of us don't have home offices or on the couch or wherever that may be. And you feel like, okay, I'm not in the office, I'm not being seen. And so I just have to make sure I'm on all the time, but to encourage them to get out and to take those mental health breaks so we have started, posting, what'd you do today to get outside or to, take a mental break, post a picture of that so that they know it's okay, and encouraging that so that they don't feel like, oh, if I didn't respond to a Slack message right away, am I going to be perceived as not working or slacking off or something like that? And I have messaged over and over and over to my team that if I Slack you, and you don't respond to me right away, that by no means makes me think that you're not working, because I know that we are all busy. We're in meetings, and many of you are doing double time right now because you are teacher and, dog walker and all of those things, plus, trying to have this other full-time job. So, I think practicing empathy again is just so top of mind for me, and it has made me so appreciate some of those. I have a couple of remote workers, and it has really made me appreciate what their life is every day.
Absolutely. So we've got about 8 minutes. I want to take some audience questions, and then I've got one more question that we'll leave everybody with. So Andrew McDonald says, thanks for presenting and sharing such great insight. Has COVID-19 impacted your hiring plans in sourcing and procurement? I think, this is an important question to get to, because I think it's on the minds of pretty much everybody, especially those who are not working currently. So I'm not sure which one of you wants to take that one. Maybe Sopan or Greg?
I can just add a quick point of view. So, when we came into 2020, we have about 107 people worldwide in procurement. And we were going to grow the team by, another 20-25% based on business growth. And the truth is, look, we've had to shelve those plans, because at this point, how long this crisis lasts will have a direct impact on, how can we even take care of the colleagues we have today. So there is a lot of uncertainty based on what the level of recovery and the pace of recovery is going to be. And we've had to be cognizant of that. And we've had people in the interview process to the final interview where we've had to tell them, look, we can't move forward with this right now. And we hope you understand why, but let's stay in touch. If things get better very quickly and we enter a recovery, then we'll call you right away. And that's been tough, but it's a reality that a lot of us are facing today.
Great answer. And I think that's going to help a lot of, different people in this type of situation that we're going through right now. So Greg, I'm going to throw this one to you from Mike. From a legal contract perspective, has anyone had force majeure provisions that have been invoked or anticipate being a challenge? If so, what categories or commodities of spend?
Yeah, great question. We're actually looking at impacts as a result of force majeure. If there's a government mandate to cancel an event, the way that we're positioning it, if we have the right language within our contract, we are leveraging force majeure. I think Rindy or Sopan, I forget which, it's interesting given Sopan's background from a hotel venue perspective, we are partnering with the supplier. We typically have rebook cancellation clause in addition to force majeure. So we are on a case-by-case working with the partner, the event, to ensure that we're doing the right thing, not only for ourselves, but for the venue, because the revenue impact is being felt across all aspects of the business, the equation. So if we're canceling an event because of a mandate not to social distance more than 10 people in a gathering, as an example, we're working with a hotel, and in some cases, yes, we have to use force majeure because they've taken a hard stance with us. But in general, we are working with the venue to either rebook, repurpose fees to a future event. So it does vary on a case-by-case basis. Primarily meetings and events is where we've seen the impact.
Great. Thank you, Greg. All right. So I'm going to ask you one last question and then we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to let the audience know where they can go from here to get all of their questions answered, because we do have another place with leaders like you that are answering questions about coronavirus and COVID-19. So last question for you all. Where are you going for insight or counsel in a situation like this? I think it's really important for us to know, the different resources everybody's using so that we can all, go there and learn as well. So Sopan, start with you.
Yeah, look, I've been fortunate that we've been members of various different organizations, such as Procurement Foundry, Procurement Leaders. I'm part of the Procurement 50 with World 50. For me, it's been spending a lot of time with my peers, other CPOs, having conversation. I'm going to speak to a large CPO in an hour's time, just to catch up on different things and how they're tackling things. But there's a lot of good content out there. But at the end of the day, the content is going to help you only so much for your business. And the biggest thing that you can do is talk to your network, use the Procurement Foundry, for example, to ask questions that you may have that may be technical questions you need answers to. But at the end of the day, leverage your network, use LinkedIn, post a question, reach out to people. Those are the best ways to do this.
And ask for help, I think, is one of the biggest ones too. Rindy?
Well, if anybody has ever heard me speak or at any other conferences or anything like that, I have often said your network is your net worth. And yeah. I don't have a lot to add to what Sopan said, but I can't stress the value of networking. And whether that be, like Sopan said, there's several organizations that I belong to, Procurement Foundry being one. It's such a great open environment, and you have so many resources at your fingertip there. SIG, in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's the Bay Area Procurement Council. And then I have a small organization called Silicon Valley Sourcing Leaders that I've made friends. I've made, a lot of great networking contacts that I reach out to them. And, many of them we're in like industries. And so we're able to share, here's what's happening with us, how are you doing this? So again, I can't stress the networking piece enough, and just reaching out to peers.
Awesome. And then finally, Greg, give us your final thoughts on where people can go, what you're using for insight and counsel.
So great counsel from Rindy and Sopan. In addition, we're getting updates from CDC, ISOS, World Health Organization regarding COVID specifically. And I'm also leveraging Gartner, Hackett, and Everest Group as additional knowledge sources on best practices. But I would agree with Rindy's comment, your network is your net worth. Great comment. Certainly kind of captures the thought well.
Absolutely. Well, we will continue this conversation over in the coronavirus channel in Procurement Foundry, where you can ask more of your questions amongst your peers and with over 150 other high-level executives who are there to help answer your questions as well. We're also going to have that follow-up panel discussions with Rendy, Sopan, myself, and Greg at Forge. That's going to be the first ever Procurement Foundry virtual conference on April 28th. It is a Procurement Foundry member-only event. If you join Procurement Foundry between now and then, you'll automatically get a ticket. So visit procurementfoundry.com for more information. Thank you so much, guys. I think that, the insights and everything that you've really been able to give during this session is going to help a lot of people, and we're going to continue to help more people in that channel in Procurement Foundry as well. So thank you, Greg. Thank you, Rendy. Thank you, Sopan.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Stop it.